It's one of the most disturbing stories in the Bible, and it comes to us from Genesis 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place that God had told him about. And on the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, and he placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the knife and the fire. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand, took his knife to slay his son. Today's topic on this weekend edition of the Word for You today is when you're tested. Now, we are not all tested in the same ways, but we'll be tested on the same issues. Consider Abraham. After waiting for 20 years, God gave him a son destined to fulfill what God had promised in Genesis 17:5. "No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations." Note that God used the past tense for the promise, meaning it is already done. It's already settled. That is a promise. Then God told him to sacrifice that promised boy on a remote wilderness altar. It didn't make sense because it contradicted God's promise. Yet Abraham obeyed. Now, it's unlikely that you'll be called to face the same challenges as Abraham, but rest assured, you will be tested on the same issues. For example, you'll be tested on your level of commitment. When the going gets tough, will you stay committed to God and obey His word, or will you look for a way out? When it doesn't make sense, isn't fair, or you don't deserve it, will you trust God and remain faithful to Him? You'll be tested on the issue of who is in control of your life. When you can see the hand of the enemy at work or identify the person that's responsible for your predicament, your pressure, or your pain, will you remember the promise of Romans 8:28 that says, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." And will you remember that God is still running the show? Another area where you'll be tested is on the issue of your faith. When it looks like God was reneging on His promise to Abraham, Hebrews 11, verses 17 and 18 tells us, "By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, 'It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned.'" How could a loving father do such a thing? We find the answer in Hebrews 11:19. It was because Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so, in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. Abraham never doubted. And as the story ends in Genesis 22:11 through 14, we read the happy ending. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." And Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." So what do we learn from all this? When you are tested, follow the advice that we receive in Hebrews 10:23. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And that's the word for you today. I want to invite you to church this Sunday. Services at 9 and 11. And if you can't join us in person, we hope you'll join us online, either on Facebook or YouTube at the Village Church at World Golf Village. Have a great weekend, church. We love you.